Hello and welcome to YTV. I'm Danielle Trubow.
And I'm Lily Fast. Last week, we reported on the newly released sexual misconduct scenarios responding to student complaints about Yale's disciplinary policies. This week, administrators gave students a chance to express these concerns face-to-face. Caroline Pringle and Brita Yale bring us coverage from these discussions over dinner.
Thank you. As the controversy surrounding the release of the semi-annual report of sexual misconduct rages on in the media, Yale administrators are taking further steps to promote a safe sexual climate on campus. This week, Title IX Coordinator Stephanie Spangler and UWC Chair Michael Della Rocca hosted 3 dinners to gauge student response to the sexual misconduct scenarios.
Assistant Dean of Student Affairs, Melanie Boyd, and Vice President of Student Life, Kim Koff-Cruz, joined Spangler and Della Rocca at the dinners held in Silliman, Calhoun, and Pearson.
The sexual misconduct scenarios and the dinners to discuss them are actually really encouraging. I think they're an important and in some ways an unprecedented step on Yale's part to connect and to respond to the concerns of the community.
No one is, I think, is reading these scenarios and saying, oh, that's surprising that this is wrong. This is stuff that we all intuitively know is wrong. And now we can have a really concrete conversation about cases that we couldn't have before because of the need to protect the privacy and to maintain the confidentiality of the UWC process.
Despite these steps towards clarifying disciplinary policy and improving the sexual climate on campus, Yale has become a poster child for sexual misconduct scandals.
We're getting a lot of media coverage because the university is willing to lead. You know, no other school in the country is putting out a report every 6 months about exactly what behaviors are going on and how they're disciplining them. We're doing educational work that's being done at very few schools in the country. And all of that invites criticism. We're already seeing changes, but there's always more work that we can do.
Some of the work to be done will take the form of policies and procedures, but I think a lot of the work to be done will be this sort of on-the-ground culture change.
While much of the criticism has centered around administrative policy, initiatives such as dinners, discussions, and bystander intervention training focus on addressing the root of the problem, campus culture. This has been Caroline Pringle and Brita Yelm reporting for YTV. Back to you.
Thanks, Caroline. Students Against Sexual Violence at Yale hope to continue the conversation and work with administrators to develop more scenarios for cases that result in written reprimands.
Elsewhere on campus, administrators were working with the state of Delaware to increase the amount of college preparation resources available to students living there. Last week, Dean of Undergraduate Admissions Jeremiah Quinlan assembled all 8 Ivy League universities, MIT, and Stanford to write and sign a letter encouraging high-achieving, low-income applicants to apply to their schools. The letter emphasized the university's generous financial aid policies, and collectively, their financial aid budget tops $1 billion.
That letter and other application information will be distributed to every high school student in Delaware. This marks the first ever statewide initiative targeting low-income students' lack of access to top universities. Speaking of applications, that's why I chose Yale as a phrase often associated with Yale students. Yet, we forget that we're not the only ones who chose this university. For more, we go to Hannah Gonzalez and Isabel McCullough.
Yale students often ask themselves and one another, why Yale? But we rarely pose that same question to professors and faculty. This fall, Yale saw 51 new hires to the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. So what does Yale offer its faculty, and what draws in these new hires? The new additions to the faculty this school year signal Yale's growing appeal as a leading research university to professors around the world.
I think we compete with the very top places. It's always an exciting thing to welcome new faculty to Yale because we sort of think of them as the new blood.
Furthermore, a large number of new faculty contribute to a healthier and livelier academic and intellectual environment.
I think the real draw of Yale, as I said, is the intellectual community here, both at the student level and at the faculty level. I think one of the amazing things about having a large class of incoming new faculty is simply new ideas. You know,
the faculty environment at Yale provides a community many scholars are looking for.
So one thing that Yale is attractive for is that it's a faculty-run institution.
However, It is the students at Yale that ultimately call faculty to become part of the community.
You know that you're working with students who are themselves deeply committed to going out and making lives better for other people.
With shopping period done, schedules in, and midterms looming, we welcome the new faculty of 2017. This has been Hannah Gonzalez and Isabel McCullough for YTV. Back to you.
Thank you, Hannah. The 51 new faculty members kicked off their year with the new faculty orientation earlier this month. We look forward to taking their classes and seeing how their courses fare on Yale Blue Book Plus.
Tough times are calling for tough measures. After a decade of decreasing government commitment to science funding, Yale scientists are feeling the effects of Washington's spending freeze. The federal sequester slashed the budgets of the National Institute of Health and the National Science Foundation by 5% and 2.1% in March.
For Yale scientists, that means less funding and fewer grants to support labs in the coming year. Faculty have expressed hope that the sequester represents a low point in the science funding cycle.
Soon a younger group of scientists is also going to be feeling increased pressure. Pre-med students, believe it or not, may face even more intense academic requirements. Clinton Wang brings us an in-depth feature on one of the most challenging career paths at Yale. Clinton?
Every college student recognizes the stereotype.
What comes to mind when you think of pre-med is like cutthroat and you know it's very competitive and you're only taking science classes and you're very secluded from the rest of the campus.
Across the nation, pre-med students encounter fierce competition both within and beyond the classroom under the pressure of a stringent and selective admissions process for medical school.
Everything's about like, if I don't want to take this class because the professor is hard, I'll get a B. That's going to ruin my GPA, that's going to ruin my chances of getting in. Like, that mentality, even I was a victim of that mentality.
It's kind of like a competition. I felt that a lot of just, oh, what are you doing? And like, oh, I'm volunteering here.
You know, because everyone has ideas on how to do it, or everyone has stories for how other people did it, and like everyone's trying to find the formula to get to that next step. And you know, there is somewhat of a formula.
But many Yaleys insist that the pre-med culture at Yale is less competitive and more collaborative than the stereotype makes it out to be.
People don't talk about their grades as much as like at other schools.
In my classes, especially the harder ones like organic chemistry, my pre-med friends have been very, very willing and able to form things like study groups and work on and help each other out with projects and problem sets.
Still, most agree that the pre-med path makes for an intense, often stressful college experience that forces students to focus on advancing their medical career.
You're stressed because you have to keep up with the work, you have to keep up with your peers.
I wish that I could go out a little bit more without feeling guilty.
You feel obliged to take on so many extracurriculars.
Because unfortunately you do have to package yourself. And that's the worst part about, I think, applying to medical schools. A reason why I think pre-meds get a bad rap, sometimes undeservedly, is because they are forced to look at, well, what comes after Yale. You look at Yale as a jumping stone to someplace else. And one of the things that Yale should be is a liberating force from these end goal games.
Despite Yale's recent recruitment efforts in the sciences, even freshmen considering science majors are still hesitant to pursue medicine.
Sounds intense. Sounds intense. Sounds like a lot of work.
So like I hear a lot of people say they're ex-pre-med students, and that's like really scary to think that I might drop out.
Indeed, only a small minority of freshmen who attend the pre-med orientation will apply to medical school as a senior. In each class, of the roughly 250 students who are initially interested in medicine, 200 leave the pre-med track. The percentage of seniors who apply to medical school has been steadily declining both at Yale and nationally, but the pressure on those who remain is about to build even further. In 2015, more material will be added to a standardized exam called the MCAT, which students must take before applying to medical school. Along with the basic sciences, students preparing for the test must now also study biochemistry, psychology, and sociology.
You do need to know Maslow's hierarchy of needs and Freud's model of id, ego, and superego, and the definition of social constructionism. It's truly the content from those courses, and they're not really removing too much from the MCAT. In terms of its length, that's also a significant change. The current test is about 3.5 hours. The new test is poised to be about 7 hours, so it's almost doubling in length.
Current admissions requirements demand students to take around 20 courses worth up to 17 credits. Add to that psychology and sociology, and even the most prepared freshmen will be forced to take far more than the roughly 13 credits required for most major programs at Yale. Given the intensity and higher workload of many of the required courses, pre-med students without a passion for the sciences often find their academic experience stifled by a challenging, inflexible curriculum that can often seem irrelevant to medicine.
There's a shortage of doctors in the world, so I'm still very confused about why every single school with its multitude of pre-med requirements, we want to discourage people away from that.
There are a lot of classes that I've wanted to take and I couldn't.
I realized after last year that I'd already taken a significant portion of my just for fun classes just by taking French.
I'm in second semester physics and we're doing electricity and magnetism, and it just has nothing to do with medical school or after that, so it's kind of frustrating.
Not only do you have to take them, but you have to do well in them. And so there's extra pressure to do well in something that you might not particularly like.
At Yale and nationally, 35 to 40% of pre-med students still manage to be non-science majors, but some worry that heightened academic pressures may hinder medical schools' efforts to attract diverse or well-rounded applicants.
Does that limit the type of students that medical schools are going to see? In other words, are we only going to see students who are taking biology, biochem, psychology, and sociology, and we're no longer going to see the music majors or the English majors going to medical school?
I think it means that if you are a non-science major, as we've been saying, and clearly I think this is a theme that's important here, you got to do that homework. You got to know how you're going to fit those pieces together to be able to have your plan come together. Because, sure, medicine has traditionally attracted type A personalities, but now you almost need to take it another step and say, what is my four-year plan going to look like through college?
Many people don't discover their interest in medicine until halfway through college. And the whole pre-med requirements in the MCAT can be extremely daunting, and I think scares quite a few people away from medicine.
But also, you need some type of qualifier for all applicants. I mean, if their medical schools are looking at applicants, they need some type of common basis to evaluate them, and so I think that's where the courses and the MCAT come into play, so it kind of puts everyone on a level playing field.
Students unwilling to take all the pre-med requirements during their college years can pursue alternate routes, and around 50 to 70 Yalees in each class usually consider doing so. Sophomore humanities majors can apply to the Humanities in Medicine program at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai.
And their philosophy is we want well-rounded doctors. That pre-med requirements are really testing the wrong things. That you don't need all of that knowledge to get into med school. That's what you get at med school. That's the point of med school. So I was able to encompass many different aspects of who I am as a person, instead of subjugating one of those things in favor of a career. And that's unfortunately what I think pre-med forces some people to choose. I have many, many varied interests, but I want to become a doctor. It should never be, but I want to become a doctor. And so I want to become a doctor, and that's okay. And unfortunately, a lot of pre-meds are forced to give up. Like, I love music, but I can't play the violin at Yale, do my pre-med requirements, and do a major. Something's got to give.
I think it's silly to think that you can only get to med school one way. Like my classmates here some of them are like 30-something years old, and were English majors in college, and then went and worked for in finance, and then started a nonprofit organization and fell in love with medicine and wanted to understand it better, and so they went and did a post-bac to fulfill the pre-med requirements, and now they're in med school, right?
So I think these post-bac programs for humanities majors who go back and then a year after college they take all their pre-med requirements, I think that's great. But it asks a lot of the candidate to go back and do an additional year of school to then apply to medical schools. So I think lessening of the restrictions and the requirements to apply to medical schools is a big part of reforming our healthcare system.
However, medical schools are beginning to promote the opposite trend as they face growing pressure to reduce the time students spend in the classroom. In 2004, Duke Medical School compressed its basic science curriculum from 2 years to 1, and Yale Medical School is soon planning to follow suit.
We can't teach as much in the medical school years anymore as we used to do before, but we can do it in college, because you can't fight an evolution that's going on in many medical schools.
Professors also say that the current prerequisites don't always give students the knowledge and skills they will need in medical school or as a physician.
Yeah, yes, we took physics, but it was a class that was physics for poets, not for scientists.
The medical school advisors in the undergraduate years are sort of given a menu of courses, but not really told what's important in the content.
So you could also gear some of the physics classes, some of the chemistry classes, to be more in tune with what you will need.
Remove part parts of the requirements that would be less relevant or likely less relevant to medical school.
But institutional barriers between the medical school and Yale College prevent these type of changes from moving forward.
I do not know personally any of the pre-med advisors. I've never talked to the college dean about this. No college dean has ever come, to my knowledge, to a substantial group of physician scientists here and wondered, well, what should we do?
Resolving the disconnect between the pre-med curriculum and medical school education at Yale may help alleviate students' concerns about seemingly irrelevant pre-med requirements. But the sheer quantity and intensity of these requirements remains their main source of frustration, and that can only be resolved by action from the Association of American Medical Colleges, which standardizes admissions requirements and determines the content of the MCAT. Having just escalated those requirements, it seems unlikely that the AAMC will make the pre-med path any easier for students in the coming years. But for students who feel uncomfortable with a traditional pre-med track, rest assured that there will always be other paths to medical school without a year of organic chemistry. This has been Clinton Wang reporting.
Thank you, Clinton. The new MCAT changes will affect students applying to medical school for the fall of 2016.
And in city news, past mayoral contender Hermit Carolina is now choosing sides in the race. The Hill House principal has endorsed Justin Elliker, the 2010 graduate of Yale School of Management, over Connecticut State Senator Tony Harp. Carolina and former city economic director Henry Fernandez dropped out of the race after they placed well behind Elliker and Harp in last week's primary.
Elliker's Democratic primary numbers were less than half of Harp's, but Elliker said he hopes to give a new voice to New Haven's non-Democrats and always planned to run as an independent. Henry Fernandez has yet to endorse a candidate.
For whichever candidate wins, one of his or her top concerns will be crime. The city's crime rate has been in steady decline since 2009, but remains over twice the national average. For an update on New Haven crime prevention efforts, we go to Nicole Naria.
Thanks. The Board of Aldermen convened last Tuesday here at City Hall to discuss a 2-year, $125,000 grant from the Department of Homeland Security. The grant will help maintain New Haven's video camera surveillance system, boosting public safety in the city's most crime-ridden neighborhoods.
Over 100 cameras were installed throughout city streets and in neighborhoods such as Fairhaven in fiscal year 2009 through a $1 million Justice Department COPS grant. Police store footage for 15 days for use in identifying suspects in crimes and providing evidence in court. City officials said the community has been overwhelmingly supportive of implementing the cameras.
The community has really welcomed the distribution of these cameras in areas that obviously their crime stats are high. They've welcomed it.
New Haven is behind other cities nationwide, including Hartford, in implementing surveillance technology.
It's just the wave of the future. This is another tool in the police department's arsenal.
City officials said the next step is employing police to monitor the video cameras on a full-time basis. For YTV, this is Nicole Naria. Back to you.
Thanks, Nicole. The aldermen present at Tuesday's meeting unanimously supported the grant application. New Haven students interested in band, robotics, or graffiti club received some good news this week. The announcement of a series of grants stemming from mayoral candidate Tony Harp's State Senate Appropriations Committee amounted to a grand total of roughly $8,500,000.
Common Ground High School will receive $150,000 and the Cooperative Arts and Humanities High School will receive $375,000. This announcement brings good news for local schools and for candidate Harp, who included this initiative as part of her platform.
For those of you who thought New Haven had reached its froyo capacity, you were wrong. With Pinkberry planning to open its doors at 1064 Chapel, Yale New Haven will now house 5 froyo locations: Froyo World, Go Greenly, Polar Delight, and Flavors. All of these options so close together will even further intensify the battle for business. Whether or not New Haven will be able to sustain all 5 froyo establishments is a worrisome question in business owners' minds. But Yale's share a different sentiment. They're welcoming Pinkberry and with it, another selection of flavors to choose from.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Join us next Sunday at 5 here in the YTV studio.
Because it's your Yale, your week, and your news.